Dear students, in this module we will discuss and understand various aspects related to concepts, variables and attributes in detail. To this end, the major objectives try to achieve here are meaning and importance of concept, construct, attributes and variables, meaning of domains and different types of variables. First we will focus upon the concept. A concept is a generalized idea about a class of objects, attributes, occurrences or processes that has been a name or characteristic. In other words, a concept is an idea expressed as symbol or its words. In simple words, concepts are general ideas or understanding of something in a particular manner. They used to be highest level of generality and mostly a formal definition of what is being studied. A researcher abstracts meanings out of observed reality and attaches names to those meanings. The concept generally expresses an abstraction formed by generalization from particulars. Weight is a concept. It expresses numerous observations of things that are more or less heavy or light. Likewise, height is another concept which may be observed as tall or short. There are more abstract formats. Take the example of a concept like achievement in the case of children. This is an abstraction formed based on the observation of certain behaviors of children. These behaviors are associated with the mastery of learning of school tasks like reading words, doing arithmetic problems, drawing pictures and so on. Thus, various observed behaviors are put together and expressed in a single word, that is concept of achievement. The purpose of a concept is to simplify thinking by including a number of events or the common aspects of otherwise diverse things under one general heading. Generally, concepts are indicated by some name and or phrases. The following are some of the concepts mostly used by researchers in the field of demography and population studies. For example, like fertility, mortality, migration, status of women, standard of living index, wealth index, economic status, domestic violence, caregiving, etc. Now we will move upon the construct, its definition and meaning. A construct is a concept but with added meaning and has been deliberately and consciously invented or adopted for a special scientific purpose. For example, woman empowerment is a concept, an abstraction from this observation of presumably samples of women with low and high status. But in scientific terms, status of woman is a construct that means both more and less than what it may mean as a concept. It means that the researcher consciously and systematically uses it in two ways. One, it enters into theoretical schemes and is related in ways to other constructs. For example, woman empowerment is in part of a function of women's access and control over monetary resources, freedom of movement and decision making power. These are all theoretical dimensions. Number two, woman empowerment is also so defined and specified that it can be observed and measured. Researchers can make observations related to woman empowerment by asking questions on various issues related to these three dimensions of woman empowerment, or simply one can ask the sample woman under study to state whether they have relative degrees of access and control over monetary power resources, decision making power at household level and have freedom of movement outside its home. Similarly, economic status of persons and domestic violence can be said to be constructs and be related to other constructs on several dimensions, provided the researchers have methods to measure the different dimensions. Now, the difference between concepts and constructs we will observe. Concepts can be said that of empirical phenomena like trees, buildings, crowd, pain, etc., and also can be that of agreed upon phenomena such as truth, beauty, justice, etc. They can be measured as direct observables like height, weight, color, etc., or indirect observables collecting information through questionnaires on gender, age, education status, income, etc. At times, they can also be measured as constructs, theoretical creations that are based on observations, but which cannot be seen either directly or indirectly. For example, status of women, domestic violence, caregiving, etc. Now, we will move to another important aspect in research methodology is operationalization of concepts. While using a concept in any research study, the researcher has to consider its operationalization, which means how the researcher is going to measure the concept in his or her study. According to Kellinger, it defines or gives meaning in a variable by spelling out what the investigator must do to measure it. Thus, operationalization is the procedure to describe the meaning to a concept or construct by specifying the operations to measure it during data collection. Of course, such type of operationalization is necessary not only for concepts or construct, but also for variables, since measurement of each of these vary from researcher to researcher and from setting to setting. That is why some used to coin this as the operational definition of concepts and or variables. An operation definition indicates what must be done to measure the concept under investigation. It is like a manual of instruction of a recipe, do such and so manner. Operational definition is also called as a working definition stated in terms of specific testing or measurement criteria. In research, the concepts must have empirical references, that is, we must be able to count, measure, or in some other way gather the information through our senses like eyes, ears, nose, etc. Whether we measure physical objects like building, book, etc., are highly abstract, example women's empowerment, the operational definition must specify the characteristics and how it is to be observed. The specifications and procedures must be so clear that any competent person using them would classify the objects in the same way. So, in operational definitions, we must specify concrete indicators that can be observed or measured, that is, observable indicators. In most cases, to operationalize a concept, the researcher first needs to go through the process of identifying indicators, that is, a set of criteria that is reflective of the concept, which can then be converted into variables. Again, the choice of indicator for a concept might vary with the researcher, but the indicators selected must have a logic link with the concept. Now, we will see how operationalize of concepts, some examples. Take the example of concept like rich or poor. It can be converted into indicators like income and value of assets. Here, these indicators have to be then converted into variables, that is, total income per month by different sources and total value of assets like land, house, jewelry, investment, durable goods like car, fridge, motorcycle, etc., which are indicators for assets. For each of this information has to be collected in terms of monetary value, that is rupees in the Indian context. After collecting information for this, the researcher may decide the average level of income earned per month and the total value of assets. Based on the distribution of income and the value of assets possessed by the members, that is respondents, of that study. Suppose the average income per month of the respondent is rupees 20,000 and the average total value of assets is rupees about 2 lakhs, then the researcher is likely to decide or classify all those respondents who are earning income per month less than 20,000 and total assets of less than 2 lakhs in that particular study as poor, and all those above these average values will be considered as rich respectively. Of course, one should remember that this type of classification of respondents as poor and rich is applicable only to this study, as it is arbitrary and there is no empirical validity. It may vary from setting to setting depending upon the income per month and value of assets of the sample respondents of each setting. Further, this type of operationalization of concepts in the case of simple concept like rich and poor looks somewhat direct, but if one wants to convert concepts such as women's empowerment, domestic violence, etc., will be more tedious and needs expert consultation and opinion besides theoretical and statistical knowledge in order to operationalization them. Now, we will understand a few things about variables and attributes. In social science research, while formulating hypotheses and carrying out data analysis to test hypotheses, researchers mostly deal with variables. At this point, a variable is a symbol to which the researchers assign numerals or values. The numerals or values of a variable are called attributes or properties. For example, if a variable is defined into two categories, that is attributes, which namely rich and poor, then how rich and how poor is determined by the value of the attribute. Then the variable can be said to have a logical set of attributes. Here the variable is the operational way of representing the attribute for further data processing. The variable can be a number, a name, or anything where the value can change. A variable in any entity that can take on different values. For instance, age can be considered a variable because age can take on different values for different people or for the same person at different times. Variables are not always quantitative or numerical. The variable gender consists of two text values like male and female. If it is useful, assign qualitative values instead of for in place of the text values, but we do not have to assign numbers in order to something to be a variable. On the whole, variables must be exhaustive, which means the variable should be classified in terms of one of the attributes and only one. On the other hand, the attributes must be mutually exclusive, that is, classify every operation in terms of one and only one attribute. Thus, variables can also be said to be indicators or measures of concepts. Now, we will learn about domains. The values of each variable statistically vary or distributed across the variable's domain. Domain is a set of all possible values that is variable is allowed to have. The values are ordered in logical way and must be defined for each variable. Domains can be bigger or smaller. The smallest possible domains have those variables that can only have two values. They are also called binary or dichotomous variables. Bigger domains have non-dichotomous variables and ones with a higher level of measurement. For example, age is a variable that can be operationally defined in many ways. It can be dichotomized so that only two values will be there. For example, old and young, these are attributes type. But assigned some numerals like 1 or 2, 1 for old, 2 for young, something like that, so as to allow for further data processing. In this case, the variable age is operationalized as a binary variable. If more than 2 values are possible and they can be ordered, this variable is represented by ordinal variable such as young, adults and old, for which values of 1, 2, 3 may be assigned. The ages in each category may be something like 0 to 14, 15 to 59 and 60 years and above respectively. Some researchers may use the same variable in a discrete form, that is as single years, by providing relational values such as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something up to 99, etc., provided that data is available for such values. Now, the characteristics of variables. It has mainly 4 types of characteristics. First one is a period, when the variable starts and stops. Second one indicates about pattern, whether daily, weekly or ad hoc basis, etc. Thirdly, it should be in detail, that is overview through to in depth. And fourthly, latency. This is the time to elapse between the stimulus and the response to it. Mostly these type of the latency refer to experimental designs, where experimental studies as time between measuring outcome, that is dependent variable, and the stimulus independent variable. Now, we will discuss elaborately about the types of variables. The types of variables are broadly 2 types, based on the cause and effect relationship and based on the unit of measurement. Based on the cause and effect relationship, again there are 5 types of variables like independent variables, dependent variables, extraneous variables, intervening variables and control variables. Based on the unit of measurement, 2 types of variables you can consider, categorical variables, continuous or discrete variables. We will discuss in detail about these variables. First one is independent variables. These are the variables that are supposed to be the cause or responsible for bringing about change in a phenomenon or situation. These would be antecedent to the dependent variable, which would cause or affect the dependent variable. Generally, most demographic factors such as age, gender, religion, caste, education, occupation, etc., will be treated as independent variables. Depending upon the type of study, design and analysis of data, these variables are also named as predictors, explanatory variables, manipulated variables, input variables, etc. The next type of variables are dependent variables. These are the variables that are dependent upon or consequences of the other variables, that is mostly independent variables. In causal relationships, these are the outcomes or changes brought out by the independent variables and therefore named as effects. These types of variables are also known as outcomes, consequences, criterion or explained variables. For example, fertility, mortality, migration, nuptiality, social phenomena like childbearing, child rearing, contraceptive use, status of woman, domestic violence, caregiving, etc., are good examples for dependent variables. Now, we will move to the extraneous variables. In social science research, many social phenomena, that is the dependent variables, will be affected or bring changes by not only the selected or presumed independent variables, but also by several other factors depending upon the real life situation. These factors will vary across the research studies. Generally, these factors might not be measured by the researcher, but they may increase or decrease the magnitude or strength of the association or relationship between the independent and dependent variables. For example, suppose a researcher wants to study the relationship between smoking and cancer. Here, the researcher assumes that smoking is the cause of cancer, but studies have shown that Several other factors affect this relationship, such as the number of cigarettes smoked per day, the duration of smoking, the age of the smoker, the dietary habits and amount of exercise taken by the individual, etc. So, in reality all these factors may affect the extent to which smoking might cause cancer. Here these variables may increase or decrease the magnitude of this relationship, that is between smoking and cancer. In this context, the extent of smoking is the independent variable and the incidence of cancer is the dependent variable, and all the other variables cited here that are which are likely to affect the relationship are extraneous variables. Generally, the number as well as the direction of effects, that is positive or negative, of extraneous variables depends upon the topic under investigation. Now, we will discuss about another type of variables called intervening variables. These are the variables that link the independent and dependent variables. On some occasions, the relationship between an independent and dependent variable is not possible to establish without the involvement of another variable, that is, such relationship is possible only in the presence of an intervening variable. For example, if one wants to study the effect of the level of education of the income of women, the level of education or the income of women on their fertility, that is number of live births, intervening variables such as age at marriage and use of family planning methods of women have to be taken into consideration. Now, the next one is about control variables. While examining the independent or net effect of any independent variable on the dependent variable, the researcher would carry out statistical analysis controlling all the other variables that are likely to affect the dependent variable. These other variables are coined as control variables. Here, the researcher has to statistically account for or hold constant these variables, so as to find out the net effect of a particular independent variable. For example, while examining the net effect of education on fertility, one used to control for variables like age, duration of marriage, economic status, etc. Strictly speaking, all the intervening and extraneous variables will be treated as control variables at the time of rigorous statistical analysis. Now, we will move to another type of variables called categorical variables. Variables are measured on nominal or ordinal measurement scales, that is, the categories of the variables are based on simple classification without any order or rank of categories, that is nominal, and with some order like descending or ascending order, which are called as ordinal. Here again, three types of variables can be seen. For example, constant variables. These will have only one category or value, example like computer, book, water, etc. The next type of categorical variables are dichotomous variables, which will have only two categories, like gender, only male and female, two categories will be there, age like young and old, use of contraception like yes or no, full antenatal care like whether they received or not, etc. Then other type of variables are polygamous variables, which will have three or more categories like religion, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, caste like scheduled caste, most backward caste and forward caste, educational status like illiterate, primary school, middle school, high school, higher secondary school, graduation and above, etc. The other type of variables are called continuous or discrete variables. These types of variables are based on the interval scale, that is usually equally spaced units, or interval based on the starting point and terminating point, or ratio scales looks like interval, but the starting point is fixed at 0. Further, in both these types of variables, the categories are many arranged in ascending or descending order, in which one can say that the value assigned for the categories has an equal and definite measurement. Like continuous variables, take the example of weight, height, etc. wherein the categories vary by millimeters, centimeters or milligrams or grams etc., which have an equal value or measurement of or gap. For example, in the case of weight 50.015, 50.250, 50.310, these are all in terms of grams and kilograms. In the case of height, it may be 5.1, 5.02, 5.03, 5.04, which is in terms of feet and centimeters, feet and inches. Sorry. Take the example of income, in which case one may take the values up to paise with rupees. Income, for example, 500 rupees 10 paise, 500 rupees 20 paise, 500 rupees 30 paise, 500 rupees 40 paise, like that. Here rupees and paise are measured. Here the measurement will be up to decimal points in terms of lowest possible measurement. The other type of continuous variables are discrete type. Here the minor divisions of the categories up to decimal points as given earlier will not be there, and only whole or rounded values will be taken and studied. Age is in completed years, complete number of years may be studied as 15, 16, 17, 18 or till the age at which the data is available. Number of labors of children can be studied in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 till the number of labor children for which data is there. Generally, one can change the continuous and discrete variables into categorical variables, but the other way around is not possible. For example, suppose the age data is available on discrete basis year wise from 15 to 49, one can easily categorize them into smaller categories with equal number of age groups such as 15 to 19, 20 to 24, up to 40 to 45 to 49. But in such data has been collapsed as the 5-year intervals as given years, it is not possible them to split into single year of age. In conclude, in this module, so far we have discussed about the different features of concepts, variables and attributes, such as definition, meaning and importance of concepts, constructs, attributes and variables with detailed examples related to population studies. Hope this one can comprehend about these and make use of the same in a fruitful manner in pursuing research in the discipline of population studies. Thank you.